This is Cammie Mansfield, Interpretive Resources Project Coordinator for Gwinnett County Department of Community Services, and I'm here with Tommy Everett. Today is Friday, October 20th, 2023, and we are at the Gwinnett Environmental and Heritage Center located in Buford, Georgia. Mr. Everett, can you start by spelling your full name for the camera?
Yes, my name's Tommy Everett. It's Tommyeverett.
And can you also, for the recording, tell us your birth date and where you were born?
Yes, it's 08/21/1958. I was born in Buford, Georgia.
And first question is, are you and your family lifelong residents of Gwinnett or the surrounding area?
Yes, I've lived here my entire life, as well as my wife. She's lived here her entire life.
Right. And how long have your family, how many generations have your family been in the area?
We go back to the turn of the century with the Everett and Wilkerson family, and my mother was a Huff with the Huff family out of Lawrenceville. The VA Huff and Brian Huff and the entire Huff family. We've been here since the turn of the century.
Wow. And your father's family, was he from the Suwanee area?
They grew up over in Harbin, Georgia, and they moved to the Suwanee in the 30s. And
when they moved to that area,
yeah,
where did they move to?
They moved to the current place on Stone Cipher Road there in Suwanee. My dad dropped out of school at 12 years old and joined the CC camp, and he stayed in the CC camp until it ended. And then he went on into World War II and landed on Omaha Beach in Normandy and fought through World War II. He had a rough childhood growing up. I have documentation through those things. There's a few years missing that I can't find, but he then went to work at Lockheed and raised his family there in Suwanee and Buford area. Yeah.
And do you know what project he worked on at the CCC?
You know, I don't. I know the Phillips State Prison that was built for the CC Camp boys, and they stayed over there and resided over there. And the Vogel State Project and all those areas up in there, they all built all that. I don't know exactly what he was involved with as far as the projects.
And when did your parents meet? Or how did they meet?
When they come back from the war, a gentleman from Buford, Andrew Clark, which his brother Red Clark, built the old gas station where Rico's Diner is now. Red Clark built that station, and his brother Andrew and my daddy was Army buddies. And so my dad's sister introduced him to a girl she knew at Suwanee School, Dorothy Huff there, and they met and married there. And then Daddy introduced Andrew, his buddy, to his sister, and they met and married. And they rented a house there in Suwanee and split the house in half and lived together there. Raised a family.
When would that have, what year roughly?
They got married in 46 and started a family. And then my mother died tragically when I was 10, giving childbirth to my youngest sister. Then my dad died 3 short years later when I was 13, there at the music barn. He passed away there. It froze time. I didn't realize 2 years later why I could remember so much of my childhood. But then it's just like 911. It froze history for everybody. And those early years there in the 60s there when my mother passed away and then my dad, it froze so much time, and you just remember it your entire life, just like everybody now remembers 911. You remember where you were at, what you were doing. Well, I started remembering that when I was 6 years old. Yeah. Yeah.
How many siblings do you have?
There were 5 of us, and they've all passed away now, but 3.
And so you all lived in Suwanee?
Yes. When my dad passed away, they came down to the funeral there, and there was all of us kids and didn't know what to do. My grandmother was going to raise the baby. And so my aunt from Chicago was going to take me home because she had a son my age. And the other one was a chief of police in Norcross. He was going to take my brother, and the other one was chief of police at Dorville, so he was going to take my sister. And so the family was just going to split us up and raise us. But my oldest sister, Diane, worked at Emory at the time, and she quit school and went to work for the Gwinnett Hospital System, which she retired from. And my oldest brother was a senior at North Gwinnett, and he quit school and went to work. And my grandmother let us put a little single-wide trailer there behind the old music barn in Swanee, and we raised each other there. That way we could all stay together. It was tough at a time, but at least we got to stay together. I couldn't imagine being raised in Wisconsin.
Right.
I would have been different.
Sure, you were very close to all of your siblings.
Yes, yeah.
Did you mentioned your older brother had gone to North Gwinnett? Did all of you go to North Gwinnett?
Yes, everybody went to North Gwinnett. My sister Diane graduated in '65, and so everybody went to North there and graduated and stayed around local.
Well, tell us some memories of going to school in the area from elementary all the way through high school.
Well, I went to Harmony School the first 4 years there and had all these little memories there locked in time. My mother come and got me one day in the 4th grade when I was 10 years old. And she said, they've killed your Uncle Jerry Everett. He was a Gwinnett County officer. Gwinnett had just started the Gwinnett County Police Force in '64. And they had hired 9 officers to patrol. And 3 of those officers were found April 17th, 1964, handcuffed together down in Duluth and shot over 17 times with their own guns. It was a tragic time for the county and state, but it froze time for me because my mom come and got me and took me down to the music barn there, and people were everywhere. And it froze that time. It was the first time I could remember what I could remember, but I remember so much of that time. It was a tragedy. It took 17 months to find out who murdered them, and a former officer actually had murdered them. He just died last year in March on death row. So it's been a long, burning memory. And you get through life there and you scroll along for a couple of years, and then in '68, my mom's pregnant with her last child there. And 3 days after the baby's born, my dad came into the room and said, Mom's gone, you know. Well, it froze time again. And Daddy never let us go back in the house there. We lived in Harmony. I went to Harmony School, lived up on Thompson Mill Road. And so we moved to Swanee there. And get through those years now, I'm going to a different school, at Swanee School. Didn't get to see anybody anymore. So I got new friends at Swanee. Well, then 3 short years later, he passed away. I was a curb boy at the Swanee Grill there in Swanee. And so I didn't see anybody for a while. When I went to the 8th grade at North Gwinnett, we was the last 8th grade class. Well, all the people from Harmony that I went to the 8th grade, I seen them all again. And I hadn't seen them in those years, and it was just amazing to get to see those same people. And went all through school with them. And it was amazing to have all my friends from Swanee School plus all my friends from Harmony School back together again. It was a moving time. It was a sad time, but it froze a lot of times there. A lot of things happened in the '60s. So many people died, so many tragedies with the Kennedys, and a lot of things went through there. I really thought that's just normal for life to be that way as I was growing up. And it made me stronger in the long run.
I'm sure that was incredibly difficult to experience, personal tragedy, but also, national tragedy. And you had mentioned before that you went to North Gwinnett, but did you, in the elementary schools, did you go to a middle school?
There was never a middle school. There was just Swanee went through the 7th grade, and then North Gwinnett was 8 through 12. They had built Lanier Middle School, and my younger sister went to Lanier. But I was the last class at North Gwinnett in the 8th grade. And I always thought that was neat that we were the last one they had. Of course, it was still a small school at that time compared to now. But it was big at the time.
What was the school like? What are some of your memories from North Gwinnett?
You know, it just seemed such a local little community. People from Sugar Hill, Harmony, Swanee, Beaufort, right in that area, like you know to everybody. Now, if you go to somebody's graduation, there's so many thousand people there. When I was growing up, it was just small, you know. We had 105 parking places or so, and that's all. You know, and now it's just massive. You knew everybody around the whole school. You knew all the teachers. You had grew up with all their families. And so, but now schools are so massive. It's so much different now than it was when I was growing up. Mm-hmm. When I was going to North Gwinnett, we had one of the biggest driver's ed facilities in the state right here at North Gwinnett. It had a driver's ed course, of course. It had a motorcycle driver's ed course. It had an emergency driver's ed course with a skid pad and cars that had tires blew out and everything. It was one of the biggest ones at the state. Dale O'Rourke used to be a quarterback at North. He run that driver's ed program. And I remember going to school, we were so proud of it because we had the big, our final exam for motorcycle driver's ed is we drove to Dorville on motorcycles and back. And I couldn't even imagine doing that now. But we were so proud of the driver's ed program at North Gwinnett, you know. I remember being in the 10th grade at North Gwinnett, and they allowed boys to take home ec, and I signed up. They allowed girls to take agriculture, and that was so new. But me and a couple of friends of mine, we signed up to home ec and made cakes, and for us, that was the first time that had ever been allowed. And,
do you still make cakes?
No. But everybody found out that we were in with all the girls, so then everybody started signing up for home ec. Yeah. But up till then, that had never been allowed back in those days.
Right. Well, tell us a little bit about, you mentioned the music barn.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about how that got started, and I know it's very much a local legend. And
my older uncle, Randall Everett, he didn't start school exactly on time, and he was really simple. But back in the old 60s, there, Flat and Scruggs was the biggest music thing in around the South, and they'd built a little hardware store over in Winder, and Flat and Scruggs played at their grand opening. Well, my dad took my Uncle Randall over there, and he said, I'm going to learn how to sing that music, and found out he was a gift from God. He could sing anything he heard, he could just sing perfectly. And so my Uncle Roger Everett, who worked for Bailey's Cabinet Shop for years and years, longtime Sugar Hill resident and councilman, he could play any instrument just perfect. So as young boys, I remember as being a kid there, they just played guitars and sang. When Freddie Miller's had a song, a show in Atlanta called Stars of Tomorrow, kind of like Idol was. Well, they went down there and won the contest and had a chance to go to Chicago for the big, but my grandmother wouldn't let them go. But they were just so talented. They were just talented. And they started doing some little stuff there on Saturdays and started recording it and taking it to the Beaufort radio station and the Forsyth County radio station. And they'd play it all week, kind of live, and met people. And they'd come back down to the old home place. And my grandmother and grandfather just opened the house up. Of course, the kids, we all had to stay outside. But that was going along in 62 and 3 and getting popular there in the old town of Swanee. Well, then the murders happened in 64, and it was a tragic time. And it's hard to imagine them taking that long to find out who murdered them. And so everybody would just gather and try to help the family. My dad was one of the first police hired in Beaufort there with Red Smith and those guys. And him being a war hero, and everybody came trying to help him find out who murdered these policemen. And it kept growing bigger and bigger. Through the years, they said, well, if we keep playing music, it'll help soothe the family. So more and more people started coming. And when I was a kid, the yard was always full. My mother died in '68. My dad had to be going through a time like I couldn't imagine. So he built a little music room beside the house, and it was just for playing. It had a little stage. I still had the original microphone, and people would gather in there and they would play. There'd be 3 or 4 bands some Saturdays come play. And it was something I always remember when my mother passed away. My grandmother was going to raise the baby. Well, there was no bathroom in the house. It was country. You had an outhouse. Well, they wouldn't let her bring the baby there. This was '68. So the musicians and patrons and things, they came down and put a bathroom on the porch, put in outdoor septic tank and things, so she could bring that new baby down there and raise it. And so there my grandmother raised my little sister with all these people on Saturdays, just my grandparents just opened their home up. And they had simple rules in those days. Back then you couldn't wear dresses, you had to be reasonably dressed, and there was no alcohol allowed. I mean, it was pretty stern. And so then, after my mom passed away, my daddy built the music room. And then he had a vision of wanting a bigger barn. So a man in Norcross that it came up there, he said, I've got a big 3-story apartment building. If y'all want to tear it down, you can have all the wood. So the musicians and patrons would come down and drive their trucks to Norcross. I was a kid, mind you. They didn't have any money, but they tore this big apartments down, brought all the lumber back up there and piled it up, straightened all the nails. We would sit there with stumps and hammers and straighten it because we had to reuse everything. We used all the windows and nails. And they built what is now the historic Everett's Music Barn. Started in '70. Don't know the exact opening date. In '71, my dad died November 17th, '71, just a couple of months after it was open. And since then, it's been going every Saturday. This next April will be 60 years. The city and the county's made it an historic site. We're very proud of it. Bit of a story. A lady wanted to do an interview with me about the Georgia History Center. They had revamped it across from the governor's mansion. And so I took my wife and we went down and I expected a couple of people. There was 20 people there. Hair and makeup. I'd never been so embarrassed. And so they did this big elaborate thing. And so now when you go across from the governor's mansion and go in this fancy history center, you see my smiling face telling about this music venue in Swanee. It's just, I'm so blessed that it's actually there. There's 9,000 people in walking distance of that little barn. And people come from all over the world to visit it. It's still run the same way. We have a coffee can. People come from Boston, Philly. How much is a sandwich? The coffee can, it's a donation. And how much is a drink? It's all just donation. And we survived for 60 years that way. And it's also a place you can bring your family and your parents or your children and not worry about any foolishness because there's no alcohol allowed. Just come in. If you don't have any money, a lot of people now don't carry money. They have a debit card. Just come in and sit down and enjoy the fellowship. That means more to me than anything. All the family members that have gone on, they've all passed away. I can't sing any. I'm tone deaf. Run the sound for over 40 years. I've run sound for some of the biggest venues around. I've done all the stuff, but I'm tone deaf. I can't sing, and my wife reminds me of that on a regular basis. I know all the words. I tell everybody I sing just like Garth Brooks is what I hear, but it don't sound like that. And so, but what I do is provide a venue and run that place. And I'm blessed beyond belief to have that right in Swanee.
When did you take over for running the barn?
In '78 there, they wanted to move the sound back in it back and make it a little more advanced. The music had caught on, the crowds were huge. And so they needed somebody to run the sound, and that was me. I said, I'll do it, I can do it, I can do it. And back then, everybody smoked. There was about 45 ashtrays in that building. I still remember it was terrible, but we did that, and my sister Diane run the show back there. in the back. Well, she passed away about 12 years ago. That's why I started doing everything then. I have my sister Renee, my youngest sister Renee, and her husband. They help me, and just we keep it going. I tell everybody I'm just everybody down there is my family. I call them the Everett's Music Barn family. They're all the patrons are my family. When they come from overseas, when they come from England, and they come back each year, they're my family. Everybody that comes in the door is my family. And so I'm just a caretaker while I'm here. I'll do my best to keep it going as long as we can. One thing Swanee did is adopted us into their charter. It's a national asset. That way, it's not going to get pushed down and townhomes put there. I feel like we can stay for a long time in our simple means and our simple process. I've been married 33 years, and we've been on 2 or 3 vacations. That's about it. Because I got a job to do on Saturday, and I told my wife when we first met, we can do a lot of things, but I've got something to do on Saturday. I'm kind of obligated. That's my fulfillment, is seeing those people. And a lot of them, that's the only place they go. They don't go anywhere. They just come to that little barn and know that it can be trusted. And that's what I get out of it. That's my blessing. That's why I don't say, well, we're not going to open this week. I'm busy. I'm just not busy. I'm just always there.
Tell me about some of the different bands that have played.
You
over
know,
the years.
there has been Doyle, Lawson, and Quicksilver, of course. One of the most popular bands, and they've won probably more awards than anybody, is Third Time Out. He lives over in Cumming, Georgia, Mr. Russell Moore. They started and formed there. All the recordings, the early days there, and they went on to travel the world time after time for 20 years. They were formed there. There's probably 200 musicians or 300 right now out on the road that just started there parking cars or just was coming when they were children and kids, and they've just went on and play music professionally. We have a lot. I have an autistic boy there that his mom brings him every Saturday night and drops him off at 5 o'clock. He brings all the instruments. I've never heard him say hello. He's just a gift from God. And he stays till 10 o'clock, and she comes picks him up. And he plays beautifully, and people invite him out to play on the stage. He's just a gift. And to have that place for him to come. But yeah, Doyle Lawson, Third Time Out, J.D. Crowe, all the bluegrass legends, the country gentlemen, they've all been there. The Steep Canyon Rangers, they've all been there. They used to play at places where there's just tens of thousands of people. But when you come to the music barn, everybody's sitting right in front of you. They're right out front, and they only come for one reason, the music and fellowship. It's not a lot of loud disturbances. It's just right in, and the musicians love that part. They love to come by. Jesse Surin and the Groundbreakers are from Finland. They don't speak any English. They come to Nashville every year. But when they land in Atlanta, they come to the barn and perform for us, and they play bluegrass perfect. And then they go on to Nashville and around the United States. And just to have them visit, it's an amazing thing. When the foreign exchange students come to Atlanta, they all come to the barn, and they're from literally every corner of the world. But it's just the music, it's the fellowship. It's really touching.
Is there a single memory about the venue that sticks out to you, or?
It's just the old ways of my grandmother. Something that sticks to me. I had a friend of mine, he's a longtime Beaufort resident there, and he had hair down to his waist. And good guy, just had long hair. Well, they didn't allow any long hair back in the day. It's not accepted. And so he put floors down in my grandmother's house. You know, she just had a fit, said he's the nicest person in the world, he just had long hair. And he wanted to come to the barn, and she said, well, you can come, but you got to put your hair under your hat. And so he put his hair under his hat, and he came to the barn and got to sit and listen through all that. You know, my grandmother said, he's such a nice guy to be a hippie. And she didn't mean anything by it. It was just the old school she was from. And those little memories like that just stick in my mind. And the memories like the gentleman that comes every Saturday now. He's a special human being. And his music is just amazing. You can just go and listen and play, and he just plays so beautiful. But he's a special person. And to have that place for him to come, it just touches my heart.
Your grandmother, did she enjoy the music?
She did. She enjoyed the music there, and she enjoyed the people around. I couldn't imagine opening my home up like that, just every week, and just have people coming in from everywhere. They would all come in, and she just had a newborn baby there. My sister was there every Saturday. They'd stay there till midnight or 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, sometimes all night long, sit there and play. I feel like it gave her a reason for living. In the tragic life that happened with her son and all, I think it really gave her a bright star there. We've got people coming this week that been coming the entire time. And that's neat that they keep coming year after year after year. I have a lot of people now in their 40s, and they'll come in and they say, my dad brought me here when I was 10. And I remembered it, and so now I'm back in Atlanta on business, and said, I was wondering if it was still there, and you're still there. And they still have these memories when they were kids growing up. And now, of course, everything's big, grown up around everywhere, but that old barn is still the same old barn. That's just very neat to me.
Well, I know you do things, other things as well. Tell us a little bit about your involvement with the golf course.
Yeah. I was a printer for 22 years there in Swanee. It was the first major business in Swanee. They built veneer graphics there in Swanee, old Atlanta Business Forms. That was the biggest business in Swanee at the time, and I worked there for 20 years, and then I went to work at the golf course. My Uncle Roger was a councilman there in Sugar Hill. And there was a lot of water issues there in Sugar Hill. What are you going to do with the sewer, you know? And Wayne Hill wasn't here yet, so there was a lot of problems. So the idea was brought up there to an affluent golf course to spray the water. It hadn't been done before. And so it took a lot of planning, a lot of engineering, a lot of designing to build this golf course. So as soon as, right after it opened, I went to work for him there. And he took the water in, the wastewater, and they treated it to an A level. And then they applied it on the golf course. And things went along pretty good for several years. And Sugar Hill grew. Then it outgrew the water. So then it had to be added spray fields put on, more and more and more. And one time we were spraying 670,000 gallons of water a day, year round. That's a lot of water. And it came to the county had purchased the city's affluent plant and operated it through there. We just applied the water. The city actually just applied the county's water. And it was getting to be more and more water. And I tell this story, and it's hard to believe, but a friend of mine owns a pipeline company, and we were eating dinner one day. I said, boy, we're getting in trouble here. Our water, we're getting so much water. What are we going to do? And he told me, he said, well, there's a manhole series right on the other side of the 20 there. All you got to do is get your sewer over there. Wayne Hill's running. It'll gravity to Swanee and pump to Wayne Hill. And I was like, it can't be that simple. It can't be, this can't work that way. So meeting with the county and some meetings and all, I told a couple of guys, I said, all we got to do is get the water across the road, and we don't have a problem. And I know that won't work, but then 6 or 8 months later, he said, well, so they put a tunnel under the golf course and took all the sewer from the Bowman Island Basin and tunneled it under the golf course, under 20, and it comes over here to Wayne Hill, and problem solved. And without that tunnel, there'd be no schools over there. There'd be no development over there because they didn't know where to put the sewer. But just a tunnel under a golf course. And it just come from a guy just an engineer guy that just said, all you got to do is get the water over there. Took something that complicated that it was going to be devastating because the city was running out of a place to spray it, and the county had the permit. But what are you going to do? So much was coming in just a couple of short years. So I worked there 23 years, I think. The affluent water was shut off, of course, and we had went on to become a very popular golf course now. Very popular. But I've told people before, if it hadn't been for the little golf course, Sugar Hill would not be what it is today, because there was nowhere to put the sewer. And that's a long time ago, and people never even realized that. But the little golf course actually saved Sugar Hill on account of the sewer water. And I firmly believe that.
Wow. And I think there's a story about some stills.
Yeah.
With the golf course as well.
I grew up with the Sutter family there in Sugar Hill. And there was 5, working with the affluent water and water testing and all. There were 5 streams on that golf course when it was constructed. Cold water streams. The colder the water, the better the moonshine. And so in the old days, there was a few stills around. And I know where a few of them were. And I actually brought Mr. Andy Sudduff and his daddy out there. And he showed me where the last still he had was. And we're walking back down through the old spray fields at the time and down this old creek basin. I thought, I bet the still was here. He said, no. The trick is you never put a still where you think it would be. You had to put a still somewhere. No, that was the old days. And he was talking. And he was talking about the last time he had this still in the 60s there. And he said, I had this old car part that I set on top of this big keg to keep it from thumping so loud, We were talking that. And lo and behold, when he said, it's right over there, and leaves and years of debris, and we start moving this stuff, and there's some old metal. He said, yeah, I had this wooden trough to funnel the water. And we stumbled around, and there's that old car spring that was still laying there that he had used on top of that old thumper keg. And that was just such a amazing thing to know that it was just still laying there where he left it all those years ago. And it's still there today. There were about 3 stills up there. Some of them was just the old wooden troughs. You had to get that cold water over to a still. And you just made old wooden troughs, and just laid them out there. Pretty amazing about the moonshine made there back in the old days. As compared to what it is now, there's homes everywhere now, but just to think that somebody could tell you something happened way back and go right back over there and it's still there. It's pretty amazing to me.
How many years later would that have been, do you think?
Probably from 67 till 2016. Yeah, it was a long time. A lot of years later. Andy went on to he's got a moonshine whiskey brewery there. They're all over the state now. He has his own moonshine brand, and his daddy helped him with all the formulas, and they're all over now. RM Rose is the brand name now. That's the old Sudduth moonshine. A lot of those recipes is RM Rose now. And that's neat to me to note that legacy still lives on. Started there on the Oak Creek banks of Sugar Hill.
And you have a connection to the Sugar Hill bowling alley as well?
The bowling alley, Shelley Bailey there and his dad, Glad Bailey. We built a little RC racetrack there in Sugar Hill in the 80s. And I had learned that his dad, Gladstone Bailey there, is the one that built the bowling alley there in Sugar Hill, the old duck pin bowling alley. It was just a small little rough house bowling alley there in Sugar Hill built back in the days. And so when we built the racetrack there in Sugar Hill, Glad would tell me all the old stories about the bowling alley. And it lasted for several years there in Sugar Hill. A lot of old memories. All the old timers talked about it. It was gone before I come along. They talked about that. And then Glad's son, Shelley, we started RC racing in the early 80s, and it got really popular, got really big. And so Shelley always had this dream there. But Shelley, but it was Glad's son. He married Livonia Shelley. And Livonia's family is the ones that came in and did the gold mines there in Sugar Hill. There were two Shelley brothers that came in here. One of them did the gold here in Sugar Hill, and one of them went to California to gold mining. And I think it's Shelley Lane or Shelley Drive, something in Sugar Hill that's named after that family. Well, Glad married Livonia Shelley. Her son, I'm rambling, but Shelley Bailey wanted this racetrack. So we went there in Sugar Hill behind the Bailey cabinet shop and built a little RC track. Started out small, but it got really big and really popular. There'd be hundreds of people there every week. And we raced those little cars there, had national events, worldwide events, championships. It had an RC oval, one of the biggest ones in the Southeast. It had an RC road course. It had an RC off-road track. It was a premier on the East Coast United States RC facility for about 20 years there in Sugar Hill. Most people now wouldn't even know it, but it really, I got invited over to Loganville. Some guys of ours got a track. When I was running a track, what I would do is kids would come, and I'd say, here, drive my car. You can just drive my car. And these little kids would get to play with these cars. And boy, a boy tore me up over there. He's a team driver. He travels the world racing. And he said when he was young, his dad had left him. And his mom would bring him up there on Friday and Saturdays. I didn't know. But I let him drive my little car. And when he got up big enough, he started cutting grass and bought him a little car. And I'd helped him. And he went on to race. And now he's a factory team driver for a company in California. He does it for a living. And he called me over this track and he tells me this story about how I helped shape his life. And his daddy had left him. And he didn't have nothing but that little racetrack there in Sugar Hill. And now he's a world famous driver. Well, I was about to cry. And then he said, now talk to the people. It just tore me up to know that I'd touched some kid that way, just helping a kid. I had no idea about his family history until he had told me. That means so much. But it just goes to show. If you just show a little love to a kid, it'll last them a lifetime. And I learned that there at the racetrack, helping those kids. Some of them had a lot of money, some of them had nothing. But it was a good place for them to come. And just like the music barn, it was run the same way. No alcohol, clean environment. And Sugar Hill loved it being there at the time. It was just a gym on the East Coast, right there in Sugar Hill, for over 20 years.
Y'all have done a lot for the community and
Yeah.
really just developing places for people to feel
love and fellowship.
I'm just looking at my notes. I don't want to forget to ask any of our questions. Have you already talked about Red Smith?
No, I had mentioned earlier my dad was one of the first officers hired there in Beaufort, along with Red Smith. I've got an old picture there with police car number 1. There's 3 officers there, and the picture was a very small police force. And there was a lot of liquor and crime around Beaufort in those days. And Red Smith and my dad and all busted up a lot of steels around. They would find them, got some old pictures of them busting the old steels up. The old community here was rough back in the 60s. It's come a long way. It has come a long way, but Dad left the police department in Beaufort and went to work for Lockheed. And he worked there for years and years as I was growing up. He was a guard there. There was no liquor still down on Level Creek Road there. And I heard the story, of course, but I don't know. But Dad busted a man with the old liquor there, and he took off running out Level Creek Road, toting a case of liquor under each arm. And Dad chased him, and finally he got over on what is now Swanee Lawrenceville there in Sugar Hill, and he was walking down the side of the road still toting that liquor. And he just stopped walking. He told it to my dad. He said, I'm tired of running. Just lock me up. And I thought that was the neatest story, that he'd run all the way from Level Creek, all the way back around over to Swanee-Lawrenceville Highway and finally surrendered. That was a neat story.
And then there's a story about Glad's Model T.
Yeah, he had an old Model T there, and he wanted me to come work on it. Well, I'd never even seen one. You know, it was just a car, though. And we worked on that car and worked on that car. And to get to drive that thing and ride in it, that was an experience of a lifetime for a car that age. And old Glad, he loved that old thing. And we got to drive it around town there. I just loved that. Yeah.
Do you know where he got it from?
I do not.
How long did it take to restore
Lord.
it?
We just worked on it. I'd go up there every evening. We'd just work on it and work on it.
Well, having a long history of your family living in the area, what are some of the things that you've seen change in the area in your lifetime?
Well, when you're growing up, it's not history, it's just life, both good and bad. There's great things that come through this world your way, and then there's tragedies that come your way, and you don't think anything about it. But it seems to me in the last 10 or 12 years, in the Swanee, Beaufort, and Sugar Hill area, and I'm sure it's probably everywhere, people are recognizing that things are going away, and they'll be forgotten. They'll never be known. It's just something people used to talk about. I love the fact that these cities and counties are capturing some of this old history so it can just be remembered for grandkids to look at and things of that nature, just like I'd said about the old people visiting the barn. They're 50 years old now, and they were just 10 or 12 when they were coming. And now they live in Los Angeles or wherever they live, but when they're on business in Atlanta, they remember something that simple. And that's the neat part about history to me, that's been captured and recorded and kind of preserved. I love that.
If you could leave a message for future people living in this area, what would you say to them?
Well, there's just so many people in the area now, and everybody from the outside just looks so prosperous, and everybody's life just looks so happy and normal. But I assure you it's not. It's like my childhood, everybody's childhood. There's always people that's reaching out. There's always people needing something. And if you can just bless a child or just show somebody a nice gesture, you never know what that child's going to grow up to become, who they're going to be. And you look back and say, I remember that kid when he was small, but you don't know the tragedy that kid was going through. And if we can help our children to become better people, they in turn are going to make us what we are today. It's not all about the money. It's about the fellowship and love for our children.
Well, Mr. Everett, we really appreciate you taking the time to share your stories and your memories of the area, and also everything you've contributed, you and your family have contributed to the culture of Gwinnett County. So thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you. My pleasure.